Hi, everybody. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. I'm the host of the Sports Psychology Hour radio show that airs every Sunday morning in Kansas City from 7 to 8 a.m. on Sports Radio 810 WHB. That's 810WHB.com if you want to listen online. And I've launched, in addition to our radio show, the Sports Psychology Hour as a podcast now via live stream. So go visit my website, which is winnersunlimited.com. Click on the podcast tab, and you can hear years of episodes of the show. And tonight, I'm very lucky to have my good friend Nick Lowery on with us. Nick and I have known each other since 1985. And when he retired in 1996, he was the most accurate kicker in the history of football and had kicked more field goals than anybody in the history of football. And we're very lucky to have him join us tonight. So, Nick, thanks for joining me, my friend. Appreciate it. And before we get going on some stuff, tell everybody what you're up to these days, because you're up to all kinds of things. So share with everyone where you are and what's going on.
Well, you know what? The other day when we ran into each other at the Bengals Chiefs game at Arrowhead, during the game, it was kind of neat to hear them ask the question in their Chiefs 101 history, who's the all-time scorer for the Chiefs, which they've never done before. And it happens to be me. And I'm very proud of that, as I am to have my name next to Marty Schottenheimer, who's the one that began this revitalized era of winning and helped me experience what it was like to have a full Arrowhead Stadium and a really tough, cohesive team. But today, I represent a bunch of teams. I do something called Champions for the Homeless, which is, to me, what life's about, which is how do we bring people together in a culture of divisiveness and all these algorithms designed to focus on the 10, 20% that we don't agree on. And to help the homeless as a way of just basically expressing gratitude in our lives. It's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. I've done 69 now as of Sunday. If you go to Champions for the Homeless, Nick Lowery, there's a bunch of TV stories about it. And I'm really proud of it because it builds empathy, which is pretty important for athletes coming out of a narcissistic culture. Remember that your ego helps you compare yourself to Joe Montana and Jan Stenner and Bobby Bell and Patrick Mahomes, but it also at some point needs to be replaced by the appetites of your spiritual development as a human being. And anyway, so I do that. I'm very proud of that. I love that. And then I work with two AI companies, Andy. One is called Alzheimer's Treatment Centers of America. And it actually was given permission, and I announced this at Alliances, which is a great networking organization in Arizona, that the FDA itself has given us permission to say we can reverse. Alzheimer's Treatment Centers of America can reverse Alzheimer's and dementia. My brother died from complications from that during COVID. My mother had dementia. Most people listening on here know someone very close to them that is either suffering from it or has died from it. And so I'm excited about that because, as you know, Mike Webster, featured in the movie Concussion, was the first person diagnosed by Dr. Bennett Amalu in the movie, played by Will Smith, as having chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and which is much related to Alzheimer's. And since this show and your life and your expertise and insight and wisdom is dedicated to a healthy brain, this is all about keeping brains healthy. And then I also work with something called Massive Blue, which catches the bad guys, catches human traffickers and fentanyl traffickers, drug traffickers. We're working with Pinal County in southern Arizona and some other folks. And we have a program called Prism, Andy, which protects the reputations of really famous people. We're working with someone, I can't say who it is, but it's one of the top female musicians on the planet. And so those are really exciting. And then I work for these guys, El Bendito Yankee Tequila, and my former teammate, Jim Bob Morris, who played at Kansas State, was All Big Eight twice, and then finished with the Green Bay Packers. We started this 4 years ago, and it's won tons of awards, so that's fun. I'm not a big drinker, but I have to tell you, it's fun representing a really good tequila. So life is full, getting chances to do lots of things to help people. And the older we get, I think, you know this every day, when you're helping people, it only helps you as well, helps you remember how many blessings you have in your life. So that keeps life balanced, and that keeps me happy.
I'm not surprised because, we've caught up the other day after several years, and I'm not surprised you're involved in all these things because, we met back in 1985 when I was writing a book with sportscaster Gene Fox about sports
Yes.
psychology.
And you have done a great job. Let me brag about you. Andy Jacobs had been a sports psychologist for the 1984 U.S. Olympic team in L.A., which had won more medals that year than
cycling team.
Thank you. Cycling team that it had ever done before.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we won 9 medals, hadn't won any in 72 years. And it's interesting, since I've been on Facebook now, I've been catching up with a lot of the cyclists. In fact, in the last week, I've talked with Pat McDonough and Dave Grills, who both silver medalists from that team I haven't talked to in 40 years.
Wow.
And they want to come on the show too. But let's focus on what we're going to do tonight, because you and I have known each other for a long time. It's hard to believe it's 39 years. And we started working together because Gene and I were writing this book, and we decided to have a chapter on an individual athlete in a team sport. You and I started working together then, and if my memory, and I'm going to be 70 this year, so I'm a little older than you, but it's still pretty good. You started that year off, I believe, 9 for 9 or 12 for 12, including a 5 against the Raiders.
In the locker room in New Orleans, in the Superdome in New Orleans, measuring my steps, not quite feeling right, and then finally getting it, going out and hitting a 48-yarder over the net, a 52-yarder over the net, a 52-yarder, and a 36-yarder in the first 20 minutes of that game. I wish I'd had a few more because it was so easy to kick indoors, Morton Anderson. But anyway, the next week we played the Raiders on Thursday night, just a few days later, and I had 5 field goals, including right before the half, just inside 59 yards. And of all people that was announcing it, besides Frank Gifford, O.J. Simpson was on the sidelines. And if you go to Nick Lowery, 5 field goals Raiders Thursday night, it'll come up. It's a 1 minute, 14-minute little clip. But I crushed the ball halfway up the net for 59 yards. And O.J., you can hear his voice afterwards saying, it looked like it could have gone 70 yards. So I started that season 9 for 9 in 2 games in the first 11 games of this days of the season, and 3 over 50, really almost 4 over 50. That was a time when you didn't have dome stadiums, except for maybe 4, like the Superdome. You didn't have beautiful crushed velvet, putting green surfaces to kick off of. You didn't have balls broken in, which is something Jan Stenner keeps reminding me of. And we were doing pretty well.
So you and I started working together then, and we spent the rest of your career working on the whole mental aspect. Now, back then, I'm one of the first trained sports psychologists in the country, and you took a chance to work with me. Now today, mental health is talked about. It's accepted. You hear athletes everywhere, especially with the Olympics just finishing.
Michael Phelps and Bo Giles, right?
Sports psychologists are everywhere.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who call themselves sports psychologists who aren't sports psychologists that are dealing with this. They're mental training experts and things like that. Right. But the fact of the matter is, when we started, people didn't believe in this. And you opened up yourself to working with me, and we spent, the number of about 12 seasons, whatever was the whole rest of your career.
Let me brag about you some more. Before I had qualified, I got a personal note from Lamar Hunt and tried imitating his southern Texas accent. Nick, you kicked your 100th field goal, good field goal, and that qualifies you with 76.4% or something as the most accurate kicker in NFL history. So I'd been most accurate kicker at 76. After I started working with you, I was at 85%. And I'm not going to say it was all you, but I didn't
kick any of those balls.
No, but what you did do is help all of us. We need mentors, quality mentors that help us see the better choice and what to focus on that we can control. And Andy, what I remember you saying many, many times is we always get in trouble when we worry about things we can't control, which is everybody else except ourselves. We can control our perceptions of the situation, and most importantly, our reactions, and we can control our focus. When I go out to speak to kids now, I'm 43-3 talking to sports teams in the last 15 years. And I just tell them it's all about total focus, even when you're tired, exhausted, especially when you're angry or bored, and passion. When you can combine those two with discipline, you're going to be a champion. And there's no greater person that I've ever seen. Maybe Michael Jordan's up there than Patrick Mahomes. He's just so good at not only having the discipline, but the focus and the passion, the zeal as well. And that's life right there. Whatever, it doesn't have to be kicking field goals or throwing touchdown passes. It can be being the best teacher, the best human being you can be.
I always like to say you can have two athletes who are physically the same, but the one with the stronger mind will come out on top. And a stronger mind to me has to do with so many factors. The way you were raised, your upbringing, your family, your friends, the coaches you've had. I know your coach at Dartmouth, Dick Johnson, left a big impact on you. You've been affected by many, many people throughout your career. Your family's been very important. You grew up next to Byron Whizzer White, a Supreme Court justice.
We led the NFL rushing twice.
Yes. So you've been around a lot of,
I've been lucky, very lucky that way. Very lucky that way.
You've been influenced by a lot of people, but the mental aspect, the Chiefs have a pretty good kicker right now named Harrison Butker. And
I think he's the best in the NFL. I mean, this guy with Dallas is really good. Justin Tucker, I think, needs to pass that baton from Baltimore to Kansas City. And even though he may have hit the upright on a 33-yard extra point, I don't remember any big kick, and let's measure it by the Super Bowl and the playoffs, that Harrison Butker has missed. And they've been long ones. They were a week ago, 51 yards. He had 53 the other day, and
53 and 44 and 21 the other day against.
So he is great, and it's fun to watch him. He's got maybe the best swing. It's a little bit like George Brett. If you remember, George Brett had that incredibly pure swing. And there's something pure about Harrison Butker's swing, the power he has and the precision he has.
And the mental aspect that I hear him talk about also so much, about focus and about attitude and about concentration. And you perfected that really when, the things we worked on. What's really interesting is back when you first started kicking, when I first started working with you, I took back then slides. Remember slides and your camera, not cell phones. Anyway, I took pictures of you kicking, and I have a picture of you kicking against the Chargers in December at Arrowhead Stadium, and there were 3 people sitting in the end zone where you were kicking the ball. And now, of course, it's incredibly sold out and everything. And you were part of that whole generation that started bringing people to the stand, and the success you had was so important. So share with everybody about the mental aspect of kicking and how important it is, because, obviously you have to be physically in shape, and you succeeded Jan Stenerud. It was not a very pleasant change for the Chiefs when Stenerud, very popular kicker, was let go. But then you come in and then you last 17 years, 14 with the Chiefs, and retire as the all-time leading kicker. So talk about the mental aspect, Nick, what that was about and how you utilize that to help you be the best.
Well, first of all, he wasn't let go because they just let him go. I had to outcompete against my idol, Jan Stenerud, with Clark Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs today, as a 16-year-old ball boy with a chart charting every single kick, the get-off time, the distance. He's the one that told his dad that I was going to beat him out. And I tell people, because this is really important for people to hear, the mental aspect coincides with how you look at defeat and rejection and failure. Because when you begin to realize every rejection and failure is truly an opportunity to step it up and to learn, as a psychologist outside of sports will tell you, the person that's gone through trauma, to learn from those things, they become stepping stones to more wisdom, more perception, more empathy, and more forgiveness for the oneself as well. So what happened to me was I was finally ready after 11 rejections by 8 teams.
Excuse me, I want to emphasize that for a second to everybody listening, because you were cut 11 times by 8 teams, 3 teams twice. And
well, there were tryouts. A lot of those were tryouts where
right. But they didn't keep you
without kicking them half the time. Yeah.
But they didn't keep you, so they released you, cut whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you didn't quit, you didn't give up. And what was it about you that made you keep going? Because most people would not go through all that, especially the rejection that you get. I want to talk about that for a second. How were you able to get through that and then come beat out Jan Stenerud?
Well, back then you could kick off with a tee in college. So I knew part of it was sort of like a golfer learning that off the tee, he has to just hit off the grass, right? It's an adjustment. And so the physical adjustments, very much even more so, the psychological intense pressure adjustment of you're a professional. No one cares that you went to Dartmouth College or wherever you went or your alma mater. They just care whether you make it or not. And so toughening oneself up and then getting physically tougher, emotionally tougher. And I think this is really important to realize at some point I paid my dues. I was no longer going to worry about if I hurt Jan's feelings, if I outkicked him. And I outkicked him. It was clear and simple. I ended up breaking every single one of his records by a lot. Jan was 58% at Arrowhead Stadium. I was 85%. You can hear the competitive person in me now, right?
Really, yes, I
He
can
was
hear that.
67% for his career. I was 80%. So he's in the Hall of Fame. I believe I deserve to be in there, but it's because I allowed those rejections to push me constantly. The way Tom Brady used, being a 6th-round draft pick to use that chip on the shoulder to keep pushing yourself, because you should always be, as Rafael Nadal would say, hungry and humble. Humble yourself to know you can always get better, hungry enough to want to get better, so that even the Chiefs this year, their challenge is to stay hungry and humble. And I hope that Travis Kelce hears that, because it's easy to kind of get a little bit complacent, just a tiny, tiny bit, and suddenly you've lost that edge. So for me, it was knowing I had no choice, that I had to keep trying. And I literally, Andy, getting used to 1.27 seconds snap, hold, down, no matter where the laces are. Unlike Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, you have to kick it wherever you can, and you should. It's not really much of an excuse if it is laces out. Getting used to that, not making excuses. So many people in life, all of us, find ourselves tempted to make excuses. And you learn very quickly as the kicker, any position, but as the kicker, no one cares. No one's going to care what your excuse is. The win, the referees, the hold, just get it done. So if you miss, get ready for the next one and keep working harder to figure out how to anticipate so you're out there faster. I'll give you one quick example. Some kickers will kind of walk out to the field, and I'm like, run, get out there. You better be in shape, because if you get out there after a 40-second in between each play, the coach takes 10 seconds to decide, or 8 seconds. You get to the middle of the field, there are 19 seconds left. So you have 19 seconds to pick out the target, mark where you're going to have the ball put down, trust your holder, obviously, mark it off. Now they're 10 seconds, and then you say, okay, I'm ready, and you maybe kick the ball with 6 seconds, 5 seconds left. That takes time to get used to. And then you happen to have 11 very large, very well-paid people 21 feet away that want to block your kick. So the ability to focus on what you can control and to give yourself in practice, just like homework, gentlemen and ladies, to give yourself that healthy level of pressure in practice, in homework, so that when the actual test comes, you're like, I'm back at practice. You've given yourself a way to situationally say, this is where I've been here already. I'm like an actor. I've rehearsed this enough times. I can relax and pretend like I'm back at practice and just stay with my routine and be aggressive. Don't be passive, be aggressive. Trust your training.
We worked a lot on visualization, and something that I have relaxation visualization exercises on my website that teach people how to work on breathing, muscle tightening, loosening, confidence building section visualization. We talked about that extensively throughout all the years we worked together. Share with everybody why that's important, why you found that important, and how that helped you.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing you told me to do, I told you this the other day, I'll never forget. You said after the first time we did it, that you wanted me to go and fill my mind intentionally, be intentional with positive confidence building thoughts, which was great, because basically I caught myself not drifting into any negativity, what might happen if I missed that big kick, and into positive confidence building thoughts. And by the way, I would read almost every preseason. I would buy a same copy of this book on confidence called Confidence for that reason. The second thing is I would have a book and I'd write down 28 yards, right hash. I'd imagine a score, time in the game, and I'd do that 20, 30 times. And then the morning and the evening, especially before the game, I had a tape of my previous 25, 30 field goals. because that's only 45 seconds, right? But it reminds you you're in the groove, you're in the flow. You don't have to be anything different. Just stick with that. And then it's what you know all about, all of us managing that internal conversation. So when you're running on the field, you're filling it with not a million thoughts, but one or two empowering thoughts. Because in the end, trying to be too perfect is not going to help. Just trust your training. Remember one or two things, specifically one thing, and attack the ball.
Before games, you would start close to the goal and work backwards from each direction and visualize yourself kicking the ball through the uprights, correct? That was something that you did.
And I remember, speaking of O.J. Simpson, my last game with the Chiefs, the AFC Championship game in Buffalo, I'd had dinner with O.J. and Marcus Allen and his then wife, who's now married to Donnie Edwards for a good 25 years. But we were at Houston's restaurant on the plaza, and it was us four. And here I'm backing up to 53 yards and pregame, and I hit somebody behind me, and it's OJ. Like, hey, I'm OJ. Here I am. I'm like, OJ, hey, buddy, it's my field, not yours. Your playing days are over. I love you, but get out of the way. And that's what you did. You started at 20 and then moved back and in both directions just enough. And everybody has their routine. You watch Harrison, easily swat some 55-yarders, sometimes 60-yarders. He can do 70 sometimes in practice. He's pretty amazing. And for me, then kicking into the net, running on the sideline, stay warm, stretching, all those things so that I'm ready to run right out and take whatever few extra seconds I can create so that I can pick out the target and be calm and poised and then aggressive towards the target.
You may not remember this, but there was a game against the Seahawks where you got me a sideline pass for the game. That's not possible anymore. But I was down there next to the net you were kicking in and watched you throughout the warm-ups and throughout the game, getting ready. And you kicked the game-winning field goal against the Seahawks at the end of that game. And after the game, everybody's running out to you, congratulate you, come off. And you said, hey, where have you been? I said, I was standing right next to the net the whole time. You said,
I didn't even see you.
You didn't have an idea I was there because you were so focused on what you were doing. And that was really impressive because throughout my career, I mean, working with the Royals in 1990, I got to be around George Brett, Bo Jackson, Tom Gordon, Brett Saberhagen, all these guys, Mark Gubicza, Jeff Montgomery. I saw Willie Wilson, Frank White. I saw how players could focus. And working with you, it was the same thing. You're so ingrained. And so I think for especially young people who are getting into sports and the mental aspect of visualizing and focusing, in the end, that's what you have to do. If you don't do it, you're not going to be successful. So you've got to have a physical game plan, and I call a mental game plan. You've got to stretch out, and that starts with your preparation, your focus, your attitude, your confidence. Your confidence, obviously, when you played was very high. You really missed a kick. Now, I want to share a story, and this is about the type of person you are. And you may not remember this, but the Chiefs played in Houston, and when they were the Oilers. And you made a plus 50-yard field goal in that game, but you missed the only kick, 54. I believe. Okay, you would remember. Anyway, but
I remember.
I believe it's the only kick under 20 yards you missed.
Oh, yeah.
There was a 19-yarder you missed. And after that game.
The weirdest thing ever.
After that game, you came back to town, and then I met you, and we went out to get something to eat, and we stopped at a 7-Eleven. And you went in, I don't know if you remember this, but you went in to get something. And I'm watching this entire scene develop. You're at the counter paying, and there's a lady behind you with two little kids, and she's looking at you, and then she realized, oh, my God. So she taps you on the shoulder, and she starts going like this to you. And you turned around, you had a conversation, you ended up buying her stuff, and you came out to the car. I said, well, what was that all about? Well, she said, hey, you're that Nick Lowery guy. You're the Nick Lowery guy. How'd you miss that kick today? We lost the game because you missed that 19-yard field goal. And you said, what about the 50-plus yarder? I mean, what, you missed a 19-yarder. And then you said you got in a conversation with her about life and about success and failure. And then she started realizing, and then she gave you a big hug, and you bought her stuff, and you came to the car. And it was just interesting. I don't know if you remember that
part,
but I recall that very vividly.
Yeah.
And it was like.
No, I've got another version of that. Later that year, I was 22 for 23. And it was 1988 season. And I went into a Quick Trip store, And the lady behind the counter goes, I know you. You're Nick Lowery. I saw you miss that field goal. What's wrong with you? And to me, that's the other thing is some people don't accept the fact that when you have a goal to be the best at something, unfair and intense criticism is going to happen. In some ways, it was fair criticism. I shouldn't have missed that kick. I think I was 127 of 131 inside 30 yards my whole career,
but you weren't, excuse me, but you weren't perfect, because nobody is. And that's one thing I want to get at here.
Yeah.
With so many of the young athletes that come into my office, they talk. In fact, I just had someone this week, right? He's a runner and he's a golfer and he's a perfectionist. And I'm like, but who's perfect? Well, nobody's perfect, but I've got to be perfect. Why? And they can't really give me a valid reason, but it's that pressure. And so, I think there's been one kicker in the history of the NFL that maybe had a perfect season, if I'm correct. Vanderjagt with the Colts, I believe, did. But Gary Anderson missed the kick at the very end of the year in the playoffs, or he would have had a perfect.
That's what they remember,
Yeah, but you remembered for the ones you missed. So let me ask this question. Today, here we are on social media, okay? Social media didn't exist when you played. I tell the professional athletes that I work with, in fact, I talked to one NFL lineman today, stay off social media. Don't read it, don't watch it, because his team got blown out in their last game. And what I found is, let's take Tyler Bass, who's the kicker with the Bills, when he missed the field goal against the Chiefs in the playoffs. Within 2 days, he got death threats. He had to get off social media. I'm like, why is somebody threatening to kill him because he missed a kick?
And it's going to get worse, Andy. It's even worse now because you have all this in-stadium betting. And you learn that people are most angry, not because they care about you or even the team. It's because they lost money.
So my suggestion to pro athletes, stay off social media during your season. If you have something, let somebody post stuff for you, stay off of it.
Yeah.
What would you suggest today?
The best thing that I did when I made it in 1980, I just said I'm not going to watch TV and I'm not going to read the newspaper for a few weeks for that very reason. Today, by the way, I've got 1 million followers on Instagram. It's Nick Lowery 88, and if you go to Facebook, I'm Nick Lowery and Nick the Kick. But that's because I focus on lessons for life, on helping people like Champions for the Homeless. And just helping people find their own purpose as well. But when you're a player, being on social media, that's something that happened to Kadarius Toney. He unfortunately, you just noticed how physically he was as gifted as there is, but mentally he has no governor, no discipline mentally. And it's sad, but that happens time and again. The guys that are the most gifted physically don't last or don't even make it in the NFL because they haven't learned to discipline. And I will say this too. My first course at Dartmouth College was Psychology 101. And we talked about different forms of conditioning. Well, this thing is the ultimate conditioning times 1,000. So while it can help us focus on good things, it also teaches us very, very short increments of focus. And we need stimulation types of focus as opposed to being able to focus when you're bored, which requires a funny thing called discipline. And so this is the enemy as much as it is the friend. And people need to realize that. And I'm hoping, and I know this is happening to some degree, we have to proactively practice focusing. Now, meditation is good. Visualizing, it's so much powerful. I go to this place, Andy, which is we are all frequency. We are all frequency. And if we attract a good frequency, if we channel our highest values to things that matter, that we have control over, and helping other people, making the effort to help, whether we help them or not is secondary. Making the effort, then suddenly our brain secretes chemicals that make it not just a dirt path, but a super highway. So being intentional and being able to focus on those things creates a frequency which attracts better things into our life. Now, as Carl Peterson said, with Marty, that very, very first day when the whole team was together, very first mini camp with the Kansas City Chiefs in 1989, a turnover of administrations, Carl quoted Vince Lombardi and said, winning is a habit, so also is losing. And so if you're not careful, you can be caught in a losing loop. So all of you out there, catch yourselves when you're in that loop and take yourself to the places where you remember good people, whether it's an Andy Jacobs in your life or for me, a Dick Johnson, or the chances you've had to help other people, the chances you've had, that's incremental levels of beautiful spiritual power to help others. And that takes you intentionally, very consistently, develops a habit. So you become more disciplined to be in that frequency, which is true power.
Before we wrap things up, of course, you and I can talk forever as we have for many, many years. What do you think you gain the most from our work together? We spent obviously 12 years working together while you played, but what did you pick up from working with a sports psychologist that you think helped you in terms of your overall psyche and dealing with pressure and stress?
Well, I mean, it's funny, but we try to make things, we overthink, we try to make things complicated. It is absolutely focusing on what one can control. This is the opposite of narcissism, the most overused word there is. When you have control over your emotions and your focus, I get emotional talking about this. This is the juice of life. That is the beauty, being able to control your thoughts. Not that I can all the time, but I love working and drawing people into Champions for the Homeless, looking somebody in the eye who's been homeless for 4 years, who thinks no one cares, and letting them know in my energy, they know I care about them deeply. That is the great stuff. Focus on your own power to perceive, to have perspective, and then to focus with passion on things that matter, and then attract into your life, do the things you love with the people you love.
Obviously, you have learned a great deal in life, and your work, going back to the days you worked for United Cerebral Palsy here in Kansas City throughout the years, you're doing so many things that you have picked up for yourself to help others. And it's one of the things I admire about you, Nick Lowery, because you've spent so much time helping other people and wanting to help other people get better. And the work you're doing now is showing that. So I we could go on talking forever, but we got to cut this off for now. But I can't thank you enough for coming on with me tonight, joining me and sharing your story. If people want to reach you, how can they get a hold of you? Give out your information.
Well, you can message me at Nick Lowery 88 on Instagram, and also Nick Lowery, NickLowery.com or .org. That website shows you a lot of our stuff and the wonderful stories about our work. And by the way, just to be sure, the great thing about helping other people is we get better at it. And every time we do that, it comes right back to us. It fills our heart and our soul. And people in Kansas City are as good as any city in the country or the world in understanding that there's a spiritual blessing. Some call it karma, but it's more than that. And it's where life is. So that when you're turning 70, like you and I are, I'm a year or so younger than you, but we hopefully have figured out that's where the juice is. And you've got a great wife who appreciates that. Finding a partner is great, is important, but surrounding yourself with people that get that.
Well, I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate that I've got a wonderful wife who supports me. I have 2 sons who support me, daughter-in-law supports me. And you met my mother as we wrap things up, who passed away a couple years, who was an inspiration for me in a lot of ways. But she filled me with the idea of being positive. And she filled me with the idea of, when I told her I wanted to get into sports psychology, she said, if you believe you can do this, then do it. And she was the biggest supporter for me, because when I started in 1981 in August, basically nobody had ever heard of this before. And it's been a privilege to have known you all these years. I love working with you. And obviously you're going to keep doing great things for a lot of people. So thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate it so much, my friend.
Appreciate you, Andy.
So if you enjoyed our show, check out my website, winnersunlimited.com. Click on the podcast page. You can hear, got years of these on there, interviews, radio show interviews. Listen to my radio show, Winners. It's the Sports Psychology Hour, Dr. Andrew Jacobs on 810WHB.com. My website is winnersunlimited.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.